Hello. Today's stories come from r/ProRevenge. Today we've got two longer form stories of ProRevenge. First up, don't want to work on our assignment? Fine, neither do I. This happened a few years ago in college. I had a class about entrepreneur projects, and that semester was building a business on paper. Basically, we had to figure out what the business would be about, how it would work, and how much money it would need and make. I did this subject in a different class, so I could have Fridays free. So I didn't know anyone in there except for one guy. Let's call him Mark. So I teamed up with Mark and other three leftover people to be our group. At first, things were working like a charm, since we only cared about passing the subject and didn't give a crap about our grades. We would each do a part on an assignment. We had to deliver assignments each Wednesday, but we still got max scores on them. Our grade would basically be based upon all of our deliveries plus some points on individual tests. Important info for later. Didn't take much time for things to go downhill. It reached a point on the project that basically we couldn't modulate the work anymore. The five of us would need to sit together and brainstorm about the next steps. More specifically, when we reached the point of how we would earn money without business. Either that or one person would do everything alone. My group chose the second option, and this was basically happening for 6 weeks. On Friday, I would send a message on our WhatsApp group like, guys, we have to deliver X stuff on Wednesday. When do you want to meet? Saturday, no responses. Sunday, the two checks would turn blue, meaning everyone read the message. No response. Monday, I would send a follow up message. No response. Tuesday, I would work my butt and deliver it alone. Wednesday, 2 hours before the deadline, someone, usually Mark, would send a message. Hey, how do you guys want to do it? Which I would answer, it's already done. And they would thank me and promise to release me from doing anything on the next assignment, which wouldn't happen, and the cycle would continue. After 5 weeks, I was fed up and got in contact with the teacher. Her response was that it was too late to do anything now because she couldn't assign me to another group, and she couldn't give me special treatment. But she told me to check my grades because most likely I already passed the subject. I looked on it, and with my individual tests plus what I already delivered on the project, I got a grade high enough to barely pass the subject. This was kind of odd, but all the individual tests and project as well, grades were public. So I saw that no one in my group had passed. The closest one was Mark, but he didn't deliver one of the individual tests, so he would still need to do something to pass. I could then and there be the bigger person and say something like, guys, I already passed the subject. Start doing something or I won't do anything anymore. But I can be petty sometimes. On the 6th week, I didn't do anything. Wednesday arrived and Mark tagged me in the group asking if I did anything. I remained silent. Panic started arising, group members texting me in private. I removed the blue scene icon in my WhatsApp and would read the messages in airplane mode so they wouldn't see me online when reading, except for the group messages because they would see that I read them regardless of leaving that setting on or off. So I didn't read them. Apparently, when you don't do anything related to the project in 5 weeks, it's hard to figure out what to do next. Deadline passes. I go to sleep. Class was at nights, at distance because vid. Wake up the next day, several name callings, assignment not delivered, and the group threatening to report me to the teacher. My answer was simple. Teacher is already aware. I'm not doing anyone's work other than mine. You can all go to hell, and left the group. At the end of the semester, only Mark and I passed. They got their turd together in the end, but not enough for the other dead weights to pass. Was the sweetest 6 grades here go from 0 to 10. 6 is the bare minimum to pass I ever got. Mark never talked to me again, but it was for the best. Edit. Just had a sad realization. It happened a few years ago already. This was in the first semester of 2020. Dang, have I not enjoyed the last 2 years of my life? Edit 2. Should have mentioned that it was a private college and those deadweights had to redo the subject. So not only they wasted a lot of time, if you didn't pass in that subject, there was another one in the next semester that you couldn't do. They also had to pay for it. Oh, sweet justice. They could have put in minimal effort and it would have been fine, but they took advantage of OP and got exactly what they deserved. And now, onto a long epic tale of revenge against the workplace Karen. Our story is I orchestrated a vast conspiracy to get a coworker fired. Using a throwaway because the details are specific and hard to change. I used to work at a hospital data center in the network operations group. We physically sat in a room 24/7 next to the servers to make sure things didn't catch on fire, monitored for alerts, and did routine things like swap out tape backups. But it was pretty simple work. This was ostensibly a tech job, but there were people who had been there for many years back when you had to change out printer paper and run a command from an IBM mainframe. It was on really specialized hardware and software that was difficult to apply elsewhere, so it had become a dead end job. And because there were people who weren't tech savvy at all, really, we weren't given much responsibility. You can't tell some people they can log into a server and others not, so we were reduced to the lowest common denominator. We were a network operations center where nobody was allowed to interact with any network equipment. Lowest common denominator, you say? Meet my new supervisor, Karen. Not her real name, but definitely her real spirit. She had been there for over 20 years and got the job solely based on seniority. She was a sociopathic narcissist and one of the most unpleasant people I've ever encountered. Shortly after I was hired, we were bought by another hospital and combined data centers. Karen was demoted to shift lead and had to work with us in the 24/7 rotation. She was very bad at her job, and our responsibilities diminished to very little. We had no agency to fix any problems of our own because it had to be a problem that Karen could solve, and Karen was both lazy and stupid. After a couple of years, I was promoted. On my first day after they announced the promotion, she said, "You will fail," just straight to my face. But she had a powerful tool at her disposal: the hospital bureaucracy. Since the place was unionized, the hospital had a just cause firing policy instead of an at will policy, even for non unionized employees. This is, I think, generally a good thing. But on the edges, it set up ridiculous situations where it was impossible to lose your job unless you were really egregious about it with repeated violations or you showed up drunk or high. We had someone steal computer equipment and they kept their job. It was nuts. And Karen had been there for nearly 30 years. So she wasn't getting fired without a lot of work. That's okay. She was terrible at her job. One of the most important things about the job was monitoring for an alert which would pop up, and there was a procedure we had to go through in order for some data to go through. If we didn't do this, then a nurse wouldn't get their lab results back. So in one case, an alert came in. Karen saw it, then decided to keep browsing the web. Because of this, a patient from the cardiac ICU was going into surgery, and the doctors and nurses operating on the patient couldn't get a white blood cell count, I think. I'm not a doctor. I just work in a building with a lot of them. Something very dangerous for this patient, and the patient died. This still did not get Karen fired. The reasoning from HR? Well, it didn't directly lead to harm. She didn't even feel bad about it, just a complete soulless sociopath. I'm real pro worker in general, but some jobs you just absolutely have to do. I was so mad she had to go. I kept a paper trail of everything she messed up on. It wasn't nitpicky. Literal life and death stuff here. Verbal warning, first written warning, second written warning, final written warning, termination. A slog, and I'd rather spend my time doing anything else, but that's the way it went. Then she figured out she could work the system. As she approached work Armageddon, termination, she would tell HR she was being harassed. The person harassing her was different every time, which would trigger a mandatory investigation. This investigation took about 6 months. They wouldn't find anything, and we would carry on. Except these warnings. They had a 6-month expiration, so she could always reset the clock when it got close. Everyone was helpless. Even the chief information officer couldn't do anything about it because of the bureaucracy. Karen was a menace, and the entire IT department had to interact with the data center staff, and that meant interacting with her, and she was universally disliked. And she had 20 years until retirement, and she would outlast the heat death of the universe. Then I had an idea. What if, under the guise of developing skills relevant to the 21st century, required everyone working in the network operations center to pass the Net Plus exam? It's not a difficult exam, but it's not trivially easy. I felt pretty sure that everyone on the team fell above the line between able to pass and not able to pass, except Karen. We would give everyone better titles, a significant pay raise, and entrusted to do more with the equipment, which is something everyone desperately wanted. Then people could actually leave the hospital with transferable skills and do something else if they wanted and not feel trapped. I spent 3 years in meetings with HR, with my director, with the chief information officer, with HR again, job description meetings that took 6 hours to tweak small wording, hundreds of hours in meetings. Red tape hell. Absolute red tape hell. Do you have any idea what it takes to approve a significant raise in a bureaucratic muck factory like that? But the raises were crucial because it would absolutely not be fair to ask this of them. Pass a test or lose your job without a large carrot attached would lead to mutiny. And then it got approved. I also wrote the exam requirement into my own job description. It was important to still be able to do the job and not let my skills lapse just because I was promoted. Also, this meant I could cover for people when they were on vacation or sick. Plus, I also got that sweet, sweet pay bump. It went over well. I was nervous, but the plan made sense and I was able to communicate that. People would be more marketable, the job would be more interesting, and most importantly, they would be making 20% more than they were before. And I think it really helped that I also gave myself the same requirement when I absolutely could have chosen not to. The hospital would pay for offsite training. They would still get paid their full hourly during the training, including shift differential for second and third shifts. We paid for all the materials. I scheduled 8 hours a week for people to go someplace quiet and study. The job itself had a ton of downtime so people could study, but this was formally carved out time anyway. We paid for the exam, and if they failed, we'd pay for the second attempt. We were given 8 months to pass the test, so this is how it was for the 8 months. I did not want Karen to have any excuse whatsoever and somehow convince HR that this process was rushed or unfair. Everyone passed on the first attempt except Karen. Karen did not pass her second or third attempt, a bonus attempt. Karen, being the classic narcissist, thought this was somehow all about her, that this was a vast conspiracy engineered over multiple years and hundreds of hours just to get rid of her, and she would tell everyone within earshot that's what was going on. Yeah, okay, Karen. You realize how insane that sounds, right? Not everything is about you, sheesh. Well, okay, in this case, it is, but still, only I and two other people know that. I remember the exact time and date we told her. She was in such deep denial that it could ever happen. She thought she was bulletproof. I don't think I will ever achieve anything more satisfying in my career. I'm not usually one to take satisfaction in seeing someone's livelihood go, but she was uniquely awful. She was a patient danger, and it had been nearly a decade of working with her by this point, and I was just so sick and tired of her BS. I was a hero the day after she was fired. I went to the main office for a meeting, and people were congratulating me like I just had a kid or won a marathon or something. Even the chief information officer. They were just happy for me that I didn't have to supervise Karen anymore. But in my headcanon, they were congratulating me for pulling off this elaborate plan. Morale back at the data center was also high. We learned interesting things. A couple of my coworkers left for better gigs elsewhere. The ones who were content staying were able to stay, and we all had more money and job security. And because anything could set off a BS Karen harassment complaint, people were stressed out working with her. Her being gone was like a breath of fresh air. Newcomers were told stories of Karen, and they seemed exaggerated. They were not. In order to solve a very important and extremely difficult problem, I pulled off a vast workplace conspiracy that improved the lives of the people I worked with, in addition to keeping our patients safe. Getting Karen fired is my greatest and most difficult accomplishment, and I can't put it on a CV anywhere. Oh, wow. It's a little scary that even someone that was a threat to patients was the beneficiary of continued union protection, and it required this level of planning to finally get rid of her. I also just have to point out that OP's username is crafty, bureaucrat, which is just delicious because the only way to defeat the bureaucracy machine is by turning the machine back on itself. This is beautiful. I love the fact that the paranoid narcissist was both correct about the conspiracy against her and ineptly powerless to do anything to stop it. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they aren't out to get you. If you've enjoyed the story and would like to hear more, consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. Thanks, and bye for now.